Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rourke, during the course of the audit, you evaluated contracts that were not set aside for small businesses, and you found that in many cases there were justifications or market research supporting the decision not to award to a small business. Did your office take a in-depth look at these conclusions to determine their validity, or was it simply a check to ensure that the right paperwork was in the file?
We did conduct an analysis of the documents that were in the contract files. We did not just accept the paper being in the file as the final answer. We did scrutinize it. And so we really looked at three different areas. We wanted to take a close look at what each command did for market research to go out and determine what contractors or how many contractors could potentially fulfill the requirement. And in both cases, we saw that the commands did this primarily through RFIs or requests for information. So we did analyze those documentation for each contract that was in the file, or of the respective contract files for those. We also took a look at advertising, how they advertised the solicitation. Was it posted on FedBizOps and other websites to make it known to potential both large and small contractors so that they were aware of this procurement? And we saw that they did do that. Regarding the sole source contracts, we did review the justifications that were listed in the file to determine whether or not they did cite a valid FAR exception. We didn't just take the justification at face value, we did scrutinize it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spence, prior to award, large prime contractors are required to submit subcontracting plans for review. If the contracting officer finds them to be inadequate, they can actually decide not to award the contract to the business. In your experience, how often are contracts not awarded due to inadequate subcontracting plans?
That's a very difficult question to answer. It's difficult to quantify it because PTACs, generally speaking, are not privy to that information. We just don't have access to the information. However, I would like to provide some anecdotal information. In my preparations for this hearing, I spoke to a contracting officer of over 30 years. He's no longer a contracting officer, and he had this to say to answer your question, Mr. Takai. And I quote, "If a prime contractor is performing well, I don't," meaning the contracting officer, "I don't want to rock the boat and risk diluting the workflow with subcontractors." That was alarming to me. But he said that's the reality. He said a better way to encourage and provide an incentive for prime contractors to be in compliance with their subcontracting plan and submit an individual subcontracting report into the electronic subcontracting reporting system, known as ESRS, is to give them a poor rating in the PPERS system, the Past Performance Information Retrieval System, if they are not in compliance with their subcontracting plan and goals. A poor rating in the PPERS system may adversely affect their future proposal scores, and he felt that was the better way to address that subcontracting plan issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rourke, you found that the contract review checklist used at the Marine Corps Systems Command did not have steps included to verify that subcontracting plans, when required, are approved. Did you conclude whether all offices use the same checklist or whether they individually determine if all the required steps in a procurement are made?
So in our two audits, we reviewed two contracting offices, RCO, NCR, and MCSC, and we found that each of the commands used different methods to different checklists, if you will. So there was not they were not working off the same checklist.
Okay. Having said that, would a more uniform system make it easier for contracting officers to comply with these subcontracting requirements?
I think that having only looked at two contracting offices, it would be difficult to make that broad of a conclusion across the entire Marine Corps, across all of DoD. I think we'd need to do more work on that before we were able to make that conclusion, but I do think you raise an interesting point that I think we could keep in mind in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.